The Chinese influence is great, and it started with working in the mines, working in the railroads, really being exploited. There were exclusion acts, Chinese were discriminated against, and that went on for a long time.
When a Chinese practice is attacked, it feels like racism. You know, they're saying that we're less than human.
We have a type of medicine that's been practiced in Asia for 4,000 years, yet it was not recognized by California as it should be.
I was a graduate student in a prestigious university, UCLA, and I'd never heard the word, never even had the idea about acupuncture.
When I was in China, there was a lot of rumors about American people are interested in acupuncture. There's acupuncture fever. But when I first came here, I don't see it. And later I realized I missed a piece of history which happened in early 1970s. And that was the so-called American acupuncture fever. And American acupuncture fever never stopped.
In June of 1975, California Governor Jerry Brown signed SB 86, a bill which made California the 8th state in the United States to legalize acupuncture. California is a state with the greatest population, the strongest economy, and the largest Asian population in the U.S. Therefore, the legalization of acupuncture in California has made the state a major center of Chinese medicine and acupuncture in the West. The number of acupuncturists in California accounts for 1/3 of the total number in the United States, and there are 16 acupuncture schools which are providing master's or doctoral degrees across the state. California has a relatively complete system of acupuncture education, licensure, examination, and practice, which has become a role model for the rest of the country. However, the path to the legalization of acupuncture in California would prove to be a huge challenge and take years to accomplish. The introduction of Chinese medicine to the West can be traced back to around 1850, when Chinese immigrants first flocked to the United States, eager to escape war, famine, and the economic chaos in China, and to try their luck at the California gold rush. San Francisco, California, grew more rapidly than any other city in the world at that time. Its population jumped from about 800 in March of 1848 to more than 25,000 by 1850. Because of the traditions and customs of the Native American Indians, who used a variety of herbal medicines to treat disease, the use of Chinese herbs to treat their fellow immigrants could be done openly and legally without a license. However, acupuncture, which uses needles to penetrate the skin, was considered a medical practice and therefore must only be performed by a person with a Western medical license. Otherwise, it was illegal. Despite this fact, in San Francisco's Chinatown, which had quickly become the largest Chinese settlement in North America, some Chinese medicine practitioners continued to use acupuncture in a semi-underground manner to treat those within their community. But for the most part, acupuncture would stay off the radar in the United States for over a century until 1971, when a columnist from the New York Times would introduce Americans to the benefits of acupuncture.
The general story is 6 months before President Nixon visited China. A reporter from New York Times, James Reston, was invited to visit China almost the same time as Kissinger visited China, invited by Premier Zhou Enlai.
This was the days when Nixon decided to open up China. He decided he was going to China. James Reston was a writer for the New York Times. So he went there to see what was going on in China at the time. As I say, this was the bamboo curtain, the days that we really couldn't penetrate very easily into China. So James Reston went there, and while he was in Beijing, he had an attack that was diagnosed as appendicitis.
The same night, he was hospitalized in the hospital, and there were 12 top experts in medical field appointed by Premier Zhou for his consultation. At that time, New York Times already released the news. Our best reporter has been hospitalized in communist China. So everybody was watching and waiting to see what happening to James Reston. The diagnosis was appendicitis.
And he had an emergency appendectomy. Now, Some people think that acupuncture was used as anesthesia for the surgery. That's not true. It was actually used after the surgery. So he had standard anesthesia, appendix was removed, but after the appendix was removed, he was in a hospital bed in intense pain.
He had abdominal pain and distension. The Chinese physician offered acupuncture.
So they wheeled in a cart with acupuncture needles in it. And he said, supposedly, well, what are you going to do? And they said, well, we're going to do acupuncture. He said, what's that? And they said, well, we're going to put needles in certain places, and that's going to help attenuate or reduce the pain. Needles were put in various places, and the pain disappeared. He didn't need any post-operative medication for the pain.
And he described later in his paper, there's a young acupuncturist treated him with 2 needles under his knee and 1 needle in his arm, and also used something like a cheap cigar burn on top of his abdominal wall. Of course, we know that in Chinese medicine they call it moxibustion.
They would come in periodically and twirl the needles, and they would change the locations, and through the days afterwards, the only pain medication that he had was acupuncture. And so it was used very effectively on James Reston. Well, he came back to the United States and wrote a series of articles in the New York Times.
He wrote his story about his operation, entitled Now About My Operation in Beijing. And in his story, he described his acupuncture treatment in detail.
And that broke open the whole field. All of a sudden, there was a tremendous public furor about it, where people were interested in what is this, and I'm in pain, how can I be helped? Could this be something to help my father-in-law who's in pain? On and on and on.
And later it was believed it was this paper caused American acupuncture fever.
Around the same time Reston's article hit the newsstands in the United States, the Chinese government, in anticipation of President Nixon's upcoming visit and wanting to further impress the West, invited a group of American journalists, scientists, medical experts, and dignitaries to visit several of their top hospitals to witness firsthand how the Chinese were effectively using acupuncture anesthesia in the operating room.
The Chinese government is pretty smart. They want to show acupuncture to foreigners to show their this one advantage and the progress of the socialism. So they invited American, for the first time in the history, they invited American Medical Society to visit China after James Reston. There's almost 200 delegation members and reporters went to the hospital and saw an operation of open chest surgery with acupuncture only. And the whole thing was videotaped and broadcasting through the satellites to all over the world during Nixon's visit of China. And it was the acupuncture anesthesia application opened the door for acupuncture in the West, because they saw these videotapes, they saw this report, they all were surprised.
At the early 70s, Chinese developed acupuncture anesthesia. That kind of news get a lot of people surprising and very interesting in.
When they come to the United States, we want the Chinese medicine to contribution to the USA people. My first client is all Caucasian. The patient come to see me. No need advertising, no need anything.
At that time, people were curious about acupuncture. They want to try, and when they have some sickness, they would like to try something different. Of course, another environment is, at that time, Western medicine doesn't treat everything successfully. A lot of people have some negative feeling about Western medicine at that time. They don't want to take drugs, they don't want to cut in the side for the surgery, so they look for other alternatives. And then Chinese medicine, that time acupuncture become quite interesting for the most people, Westerner particularly.
Due to the public's newfound curiosity and interest in acupuncture, the California Medical Association, or CMA, invited traditional Chinese medicine practitioners Bao Qi PN and Kok Yuan Liang to hold large-scale public acupuncture demonstrations in both San Francisco and Sacramento in the summer of 1972.
At this time, most the physicians haven't no knowledge about acupuncture, never see that. So they want to see the acupuncture practice with their own eyes.
The California Medical Association, CMA, decided to invite Dr. Ben Boqi, a well-known Chinese medicine doctor in San Francisco, Chinatown. Invite him to demonstrate acupuncture for the CMA. The acupuncture demonstration was held in San Francisco on May 9th, 1972. About 500 medical doctors attended the event.
The first patient who received the acupuncturist is Dr. Tom Amendorf. He was president of California Medical Association. He was 52 years older. The suffered for serious hip arthritis in almost 4 years, which caused a limping gain. So where the Dr. Amendorf lay down on the treatment table, the Dr. Liang first gave him the moxie warmer his lower back and the leg. Then he using 2-inch needles to some body area. So they just using 4 needles total. Maybe a couple minutes, the Dr. Amendorf get up, say to everybody, there's no question, there's considerable relief from my hip. The relief feels good.
The personal experience of the president of CMA was clear in demonstrating benefits of acupuncture. 1 month later, Dr. Ben and Dr. Liang were invited again by the president of CMA to attend a press conference to promote AB 1500R and give an acupuncture demonstration in California State Capitol. Some legislators and government officials attend the press conference and watch the acupuncture demonstration. This event also very successful.
Later that year, the California Medical Association promoted acupuncture for the first time in Assembly Bill 1500. However, the bill imposed strict regulations and restrictions on the practice of acupuncture. Acupuncturists could only act as an assistant of a licensed physician and could only practice acupuncture under the physician's guidance. And acupuncture could only be used as an experimental treatment in medical schools in California.
Now, in the early days, the law did not reach into Chinatown and regulate Chinese medicine at the time. It was left alone.
In 1970s, Eva Chow immigrated to the U.S. and she taught Chinese painting classes because at that time acupuncture was not legalized. She did some acupuncture on the friends and families, but she doesn't do it in public.
When we come to the United States, we talk, some cousins, they say, oh, you cannot practice in here. The meaning is illegal practicing. That's time. But we still practicing because we're from Hong Kong. We need to eat, but we don't have the clinic open, just use the home in San Francisco. We don't need the advertising, but one by one, we still continue.
As time went on and it gained more public interest, there was more focus on these old-time practitioners and how they had been practicing. The medical associations and the medical societies and the other people that enforce rules and regulations, the Board of Medicine in California, for instance, they became interested in how this could be regulated.
All of a sudden, the California government began to crack down and they close up the clinic, acupuncture clinic, and also arrest the acupuncturist.
Due to the heightened attention and scrutiny from the CMA and other medical organizations, many acupuncturists who were practicing openly were forced to move their practice underground in order to avoid the possibility of arrest and prosecution by the authorities. However, it seemed the first arrest in California was inevitable.
George Ong from Hong Kong, he teaches Chinese Kung Fu, and also at the same time, he practiced acupuncture for his students or some patients. Without a medical license, it's illegal.
In 1972, George Long was arrested in his office in San Francisco for practicing acupuncture without license.
First people in California arrested by practice acupuncture. The people all scared. They all go to underground and go to countryside or stop the practice. At that time, the acupuncturists need to survive. They need to find something. And that time, they meet attorney Arthur Grossman. He is a very famous attorney in San Francisco. They say, I not only defend my client, we need to often attack the government.
My mother heard of that and convinced her husband, Dale King, a dentist and a community leader, and they mobilized the Chinese community to support George Long's trial in San Francisco. Not only they get the funding for the trial, they also mobilized the acupuncturists and their patients in assist Grossman's for the trial for George Long.
Grossman defends George Long, sue Governor Donald Reagan. At that time, they used this excuse, we are not practicing medicine, something like that.
They filed the 3 lawsuits to the California state government. First, represent the acupuncturists. You say acupuncture is a medical practice, but in your textbook of medical school, you don't have acupuncture. Acupuncture is survived is in China more than 5,000 years. In California, more than 150 years. It's longer than yours. So it's not fair. So the mass acupuncturists, they have a right to practice acupuncture. Second, he represents the patient. The patient say, I have a right to choose what treatment I need, special the Western treatment. They cannot cure my problem. I have suffering. The acupuncture can help me. Why I cannot choose acupuncture? The third should represent the Western physician, medical doctors, more than 40 letters. Let him represent them to sue the government. They have a right to refer the patient to the acupuncturist treatment when it is necessary.
He sued the government Ronald Reagan, but the later settlement, the government, they don't sue them, he don't sue the government. Last one is his settlement now.
Even though the case against George Long would eventually be dropped, the statewide crackdown on acupuncture would continue.
In 1973, when an investigator from the Consumer Affairs Department told him that he had to stop practicing acupuncture immediately because he did not have an MD degree. In preparation for his appointment with the DA, he enlisted the services of Aubrey Grossman, the attorney. It was his idea to tell his patients that he could no longer serve them and ask them to write letters of how acupuncture helped them. And more than 500 letters came in just telling about how acupuncture had benefited them and took their pain away for many of them after many years of pain. Dear Dr. Wong, I was saddened to receive your letter telling me that you have been stopped in practicing acupuncture. I have had rheumatoid arthritis for several years, and the only thing I could do was to take pain pills. Then someone informed me of your treatment of arthritis, and I was able to get in and be treated by you. I must say I had only 5 treatments, but I cannot tell you how much they have helped me. I have been able to do things with my hands that I have not been able to do for many years. I must say that I felt life wasn't worth living. Now I have a different outlook on life. If this type of treatment can do so much good, why can't it be permitted in the state of California? My prayers will be for people like you who have interested only in the desire to bring relief to pain, suffering people like myself. He took them to Mr. Grossman, who said they were very valuable letters. And they took the letters to the district attorney in San Francisco, and he was so impressed with the letters that he quietly closed Dad's case.
This wouldn't be the first time that those benefiting greatly from the healing effects of acupuncture would show up to participate in the fight to make it accessible and, more importantly, legal. In 1974, the arrest of Dr. Miriam Lee, one of the leading pioneers of acupuncture in the United States, would prove to be a landmark case in this struggle for legalization. And once again, her patients would play a major role.
My first encounter with acupuncture was through my friend who was not Chinese, who was saying, my acupuncturist, Miriam Lee, is arrested. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, practicing without a license. This was 1973.
Miriam was born December 8th of 1926 in Yantai, Shandong Province, China. Her parents moved her to Singapore when the Communist Party arrived. She moved back to Taiwan in 1966 and then graduated from acupuncture school in 1969.
After she immigrated to United States, he lived in Palo Alto. He worked for HP.
She worked for Hewlett-Packard on an assembly line and started treating her fellow co-workers with acupuncture when they had a shoulder pain or a knee ache or something going on.
The one young engineer, he had a tumor in his back. After the surgery, he cannot walk. His mother is very worried. And that time, they say, hey, you know acupuncture, maybe I can help him. And then she did acupuncture for the young guy. About 1 month, the young guy walked again. So amazing that one by one, more and more people find her to do acupuncture.
Miriam started treating all of her co-workers, and pretty soon she quit her assembly line job and started working out of her home doing acupuncture until the lines out the door, there's a funny story about how the staircase collapsed with all the people standing on it because it was too heavy.
One medical doctor, he wanted to help her, Dr. Manley, and lease a part of office to her to perform an acupuncture. And that time was very busy, from the 5 a.m. until the 4 p.m. Sometimes almost 100 people. Some people from the 400 miles drive with a car to see him.
And I heard that people were just clamoring for appointments, and one of them was my friend, and she just said she's wonderful, but she's not licensed, and we don't spread the word about her. And so it was sort of I wouldn't say clandestine, but to the outside world, it would be clandestine, practicing without a license.
We introduced several bills to want to legalize the acupuncture practice here, but several bills were vetoed. Even the bill passed the Congress.
April 15th of 1974, Ronald Reagan vetoed an acupuncture bill. And the very next day, Miriam was hauled off to jail for practicing without a license. She had at that time been working in the office of Dr. Harry Oxhandler, whose medical practice was then shut down because of this arrest.
To the disbelief of her patients, Dr. Lee was arrested by agents from the Department of Consumer Affairs for practicing acupuncture without a medical license. Additionally, Dr. Oxenhandler's medical license was suspended for providing his office for the practice of acupuncture. Dr. Lee was released after posting bail at $500, but still faced a $500 fine and a 6-month jail sentence if convicted.
The story goes, over 100 of her patients showed up at the courtroom day after day after day for her trial to vouch for the only medicine that had ever really helped them.
Some people say even the judge's wife is her patient.
I think that people coming forth, her defenders, and with their testimonies, and the fact that she was such a person of integrity and character, I guess she really was symbolic, you know.
Due to the overwhelming public outcry and the swift actions taken by the state's Acupuncture Society, Governor Reagan legalized acupuncture as an experimental procedure. Miriam Lee was acquitted, but to her great regret, Dr. Oxenhandler's medical license was suspended by the California Medical Association on the charge of renting the clinic to others to practice medicine without a license. This forced him to move out of California in order to continue his practice.
That time, they need a new bill to instead of the old bill.
There was no reason why a doctor should supervise an acupuncturist. It wasn't right. And the physicians were suing acupuncturists, and one in Sacramento was put in jail, who I knew, a Japanese-American acupuncturist, because he was, quote, practicing medicine without a license. And it was that kind of attitude and fear by the CMA, the California Medical Association at the time, that really went after acupuncturists so unreasonably.
Around this time, attorney Aubrey Grossman, the well-known civil rights lawyer, joined the cause and guided the Chinese medicine and acupuncture profession in California to establish a professional association to fight for the legalization of acupuncture.
Grossman, he said, if you want to practice in acupuncture in California, you need a legislation, you need a law, and first, you need to establish your own profession organization.
So in 1974, my mother and the other TCM pioneers established the California Chinese Medicine and Acupuncture Research Association. This is the first professional organization established in California during that time. With the organization, they raised funds, and also they united the Chinese medicine practitioners and acupuncturists, and they also called for the legalization of the acupuncture.
In March of 1974, the California Chinese Medicine and Acupuncture Research Association was formally established. Its founding members, affectionately known as the Seven Sages of the Bamboo Forest, were Bao Chi Pian, Eva Chu, Hans Wang, Wei Loi Li, Noi Cho Li, Yi Gi Li, and Kang Nam Yu. When the association was first formed, many practitioners were afraid to provoke lawsuits and did not dare to show their faces to participate in the association, because the practice of acupuncture was still underground and illegal. Therefore, the first board of directors and supervisors had only 15 members. Over the next few years, several other major professional groups were formed to work towards the legalization of acupuncture in California. Now mobilized, these organizations, along with other Chinese American, Japanese American, and Korean American practitioners, collaborated with several local celebrities, union officials, and community leaders in order to seek support from state legislators and to raise funds for acupuncture-friendly politicians who would get behind acupuncture legislation.
They say in that time, in California, politician, there was three really powerful men. Moscona is one of them. He is a senator leader from San Francisco. And that time, because most Chinese, they have no any connection with the politician. Dangfei is a Chinese restaurant owner, is nearby the state capital, because he is from the same village with one of our acupuncturists. Dr. Yi know him, and then say, I want to see Moscona, but I have no way to see them.
He know every legislator. When we have group want to see Ms. Conley, it's not easy. You need to by appointment, can see them. And he said, no, you follow me.
He bring the group, acupuncture group, go to the Moscona's office. Say, Moscona, a senator, I bring someone to see you. And then Moscona open the door. Welcome. Not only Moscona, but some assembly member, also the senator, to convince them to pass the bill for acupuncture.
We wanted licensing. So we worked with a number of different assembly people. And by the way, there were a number of people that were very, very influential in this area. And George Moscone was one of them. And George Moscone came to us and said, listen, I really have an aim. I want to be mayor of San Francisco. And in order to do that, I need to encourage the Chinese vote. And I think this would be a good way of doing it if I could enact some specific legislation.
Senator Moscone said that he would introduce the bill, or a bill, to legalize acupuncture in the next session.
Senator Moscone said, okay, I carry the bill. I carry the bill called the 2117-2118. And they passed the bill. Unfortunately, Reagan did not sign the bill. In 1974, Jerry Brown is a state secretary. He is running for the government. He needed money. He needed a vote. He go to Chinatown to get the fundraising.
I believe it was through Benson Yu and some of his associates who first introduced themselves to me when I was Secretary of State of California and then running for governor.
They gave him a lot of fundraising. They told Jerry, if you elect to become governor, you need to sign the acupuncture bill. Jerry said, okay, no problem. And then, in the second year, 1975, Moscone carried the bill again. And for the co-sign, a Korea Senator, Sean, from South California, they both co-authored. The bill is called SB 86. They passed in the Senate Assembly.
Finally, in 1975, when Jerry Brown becomes the governor of California, he signed the SB 86 to legalize the acupuncture. During the celebration, the ceremonial celebration, the SB 86 celebration, my mother presented her famous painting to then Senator Moscone called Eagle Over Rough Sea, signified that they are fighting this one with the rough sea, the really tough environment, and they build up friendship with the legislator and the supporters in the winter time.
Prior to the time that I signed the acupuncture law and made it a law, signed the bill that became a law legalizing acupuncture, it was not legal. It was a practice that was common among certain Chinese practitioners, but it wasn't lawful. And the California Medical Association wanted to keep control of that. Acupuncturists in Chinatown, in San Francisco, got to be friends of George Moscone, and he was the senator, and a very powerful senator, so they convinced him, and he carried the ball. He carried the legislation, and that's why it passed. He had the skill and the popularity to be able to do that.
Jerry Brown signed the bill right away, and then acupuncture legalized.
He made acupuncture a primary care profession, and so we were no longer required to work under MDs.
Well, what encouraged me is I thought it was such an ancient art that it had played such an important role over the centuries, for millennia, that I thought the more modern doctors whose own profession had really only been recognized for not more than 100, 150, 120 years, that these doctors had no business telling what were principally Chinese, but also Korean, Japanese, other Asian people, that they can't do what has been done for such a very long time. But it was resisted right to the end by the California Medical Association. In fact, they wrote a letter saying to me, don't sign the bill. But I ignored the letter.
So he got the first bill, it was Senate Bill 86, as I recall, that set up the advisory committee as an independent committee to set up a licensing program to license specific acupuncturists.
The California Acupuncture Advisory Committee, appointed by Governor Brown, consisted of 7 members. There were 5 acupuncturists: Benson Yu, Yam Ting Sai, Sang Hyuk Chin, Ted Hayashida, and Ka-Ya Wong. In addition to the acupuncturists were 2 Western medicine physicians, Richard Kronig and Mortimer Weiss, who also served as the committee chairman. The passing of SB 86 made California the 8th state to legalize acupuncture. And although it was considered a major milestone in the legalization of acupuncture, the bill itself was far from perfect.
The first bill was passed that allowed acupuncturists to practice legally in California, but only if they were referred by a medical doctor or a dentist or a chiropractor. They would make the diagnosis or the referral and then refer them to the acupuncturist.
The second, they cannot call the Chinese medicine the only acupuncture. Medical doctors say medicine only can use by the MD. You cannot use medicine. The medicine means medical doctor.
No, the doctors were ignorant. They knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted to keep their practices going. They wanted to keep their drug therapy going because, you know, even today we have problems with pharmaceutical companies and doctors and the way they recruit doctors to prescribe their drugs. So drugs were a real threat and still are to the acupuncture field because it is a direct competitor economically as well as an ability to deal with pain and the modality of the practice in a much more reasonable and sensitive manner.
Our next step was to move out to what we call independent practice. And we worked with Herschel Rosenthal and we worked with Art Torres, who helped develop the next bill for the next step, which was to take away the diagnosis and referral clause.
So I had done the same thing for licensed clinical social workers because the psychiatrists held a monopoly on having them get paid for just referring patients that the licensed clinical social worker could do. And the same thing was true with doctors. I also was working with Dr. Richard Kronig at UCLA, and they were performing surgeries already with acupuncture at the UCLA Medical School. So I had the evidence to show that acupuncturists could function independently, and that was the reason for that bill.
In 1979, he carried the bill. They say acupuncture can independently, don't need a referral from the MD or something like that. But the bill is essentially bill.
It was very difficult. It was very challenging because the doctors controlled the legislature. They really, through the Board of Medical Quality Assurance, through their own association, they've since reformed, thank God. But at that time in the 70s, they were very fearful of acupuncturists because they thought they might lose business as doctors.
Anyway, Jerry Brown signed the bill.
So now acupuncturists became a primary care profession. It could see people directly. It didn't have to be referred in from another practitioner. So it became a primary care profession at that point.
In 1979, the United Acupuncturists of California collaborated with State Congressman Art Torres to propose AB 1391. This bill would remove the referral requirement for acupuncture treatment and categorize acupuncturists as independent healthcare providers. Once again, Governor Brown showed his support for acupuncture and the California acupuncture community by signing the bill to law.
Through AB 1391, that acupuncturists can practice independently.
Little by little, acupuncture in California, education, school practice, and everything, more and more formal.
Between 1978 and 1980, two more bills would serve as important milestones in the legalization of acupuncture in California. First, AB 2424, a bill sponsored by State Assembly member Jim Kaiser, would authorize the California government's low-income medical insurance, Medi-Cal, to pay for acupuncture treatment. This would set a precedent for private insurance to pay for acupuncture in the future. The second was in 1981, when Assembly Bill 3040, sponsored by State Assembly member John Knox, expanded the scope of practice for acupuncturists to include electroacupuncture oriental massage, cupping, and moxibustion therapy. It also authorized acupuncturists to prescribe and use Chinese medicine. This legislation also upgraded the Acupuncture Advisory Committee to a more powerful Acupuncture Examination Committee to supervise the practice standards and certification examination of acupuncturists. Both bills were signed into law by Governor Brown. Because of his support of these bills and important contributions to the legalization of acupuncture in California, the acupuncture profession now hailed Governor Brown as the father of California acupuncture.
Acupuncture community called Jerry Brown as father of acupuncture. Why? They think he made the biggest contribution to develop acupuncture legislation
I had a lot of respect for him, and he did a tremendous amount for acupuncture and the development of Chinese medicine and alternative medicine in general.
Father of acupuncture in California, he is very, very supportive on the Chinese culture and acupuncture.
If no Jerry Brown, no Chinese medicine, they grew here. We, from the the bottom heart, to so appreciate our Governor Jerry Brown.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a generally used title. I think Benson Yu and a few of his close associates felt a fondness for me and for what I've done. So it's a way of speaking. I was very glad to be a part of it. But there's no doubt in my mind that it was the activists, the creativity of those acupuncturists who first went to George Moscone and who kept pressing, because it didn't happen the first time they tried. They had to take a few years to get it done. So I would look not to myself, I signed the bill, but they did all the work.
The recent victories in California legislation gave the acupuncture profession some much-needed momentum. And as the relationship between the U.S. and China started to improve in the 80s, a large number of traditional Chinese medicine doctors immigrated to the United States from China, causing the number of acupuncturists in California to grow significantly. The rich clinical and educational experience they brought greatly improved the level of expertise and standards of acupuncture education in the state. In order to help organize the profession, several acupuncture organizations were formed. Amongst them were the California Certified Acupuncturists Association, established in 1983, the Research Institute of Chinese Medicine, established in 1985, the Council of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine Association, established in 1987, and the United California Practitioners of Chinese Medicine, established in 1995. Over the next several years, organizations like these, along with their community of practitioners and acupuncture advocates, would work with local and state-level politicians to propose and pass several important California acupuncture-related legislative bills, many of which would focus on acupuncture being covered by a patient's medical insurance.
The most major setback then is no insurance, no commercial insurance will accept or cover the acupuncture service. We try many times, numerous failed attempts to try to advocate some law that let insurance company to cover acupuncture service. All failed. So eventually, our lobbyist, very helpful lobbyist, he raised a question. That is, if we just go direct to the commercial system, maybe a little bit difficult. So we have go to governmental system, maybe easier. So he is recommending we look for workers' compensation system to break through this obstacle. I start to contact all the professional associations, try to get a unity. And then that time we have a Chinese acupuncturist, and then we have a Caucasian acupuncturist, and then we have a Korean acupuncturist, Japanese acupuncturist, and even Vietnamese. So we get together and try to make a unite front to deal with this situation, and then form a coalition that's called KOMA. Then I was elected as the first term practicing then. So with this association, that we mobilized all the acupuncturists and their patients to support this bill, SB 840, then introduced by Senator Arcturus.
That was a very difficult challenge because not only was I fighting the doctors at that point, I was fighting the insurance companies. The last thing an insurance company wants to do is pay out. They want your premium, but they don't want to pay out. And that's exactly what we faced. The opposition of the doctors, the insurance companies, the Chamber of Commerce at that time, that didn't want to reimburse acupuncturists for insurance purposes. And so that took me longer than the first bill because the opposition was so great.
The SB 840, there's far-reaching effect because before the medical system, no code for acupuncture. Even they legalized, insurance company don't know how to pay for the acupuncturist. Then eventually we create the acupuncture code. That's one way to incorporate the medicine.
With the signing of SB 840 in 1988 by Governor Deukmejian, acupuncture was given an insurance billing code and incorporated into the California Workers' Compensation Insurance System, which listed them as physicians who can independently treat injured workers covered by workers' compensation insurance. In 1997, SB 212, proposed by Senator John Burton and signed by Governor Pete Wilson, permanently included acupuncturists in the California Workers' Compensation Insurance System. In order to continually raise and protect the standards of practice for acupuncture in California, in 2002, the professional acupuncture community worked with newly elected Assemblywoman Judy Chu to propose Assembly Bill 1943, a bill that would raise the minimum number of training hours needed in order to become a licensed acupuncturist.
When I started off with my first bill, AB 1943, in the California State Legislature, it was extremely difficult. Many of my colleagues did not understand acupuncture, and in fact, those that were in charge of business and professions really had a lack of understanding of it and viewed acupuncture in a very negative way. They had a lot of stereotypes about it that we had to overcome. This was the first of 3 big battles for acupuncture that I took in the California legislature. This was when the groups of acupuncturists came to me and said, there is a problem here. In California, it takes only 2,300 hours to become an acupuncturist, but in Asia, it takes as much as 5,000 hours to be an acupuncturist. So what we have is a situation in California where students are graduating from their programs without even having the most fundamental knowledge of how to be a good acupuncturist. So we need to raise the level of training in order to be an acupuncturist. Well, that made total sense to me. Little did I know that it would be such a big battle. It's because the other members of the legislature who were in charge of business and professions saw acupuncturists as just being technicians, not as skilled medical professionals. And so they said, 2,000 hours is just fine with us. I don't see any need to raise the hours needed for this profession. They resisted quite a bit to my bill, AB 1943. We had to bring so many groups of acupuncturists from around California to go to the hearings, to testify, to meet with their members of the legislature in order to get it passed. And the acupuncturists really learned a lesson there, which was that it's so important to have advocacy and to be directly involved with the legislative process. Ultimately, we were successful in raising the number of hours needed, 3,000 hours in order to be an acupuncturist, which is the highest number that is in the nation for one to be an acupuncturist.
The successful collaboration helped the acupuncture community to fully realize the importance of unity. And in 2014, 2 of these organizations, the California Certified Acupuncturist Association and the United California Practitioners of Chinese Medicine, decided to join forces.
The member and the board of the 2 organizations recognize that in order to effectively fight for and protect our interests of our profession, the 2 organizations must unite to become one. The CCAA and UCPCM officially merged to become the American Association of Chinese Medicine and Acupuncture on January 11, 2015. AACMA, they work for many kinds. First, in the political action, they passed the bill, AB 833. They restore the medical benefit for acupuncture. Because by 2008, because of the financial crisis, they dropped the benefit for 7 years. And our association and found the lawmaker to pass the bill to restore the reimbursement, Medicare reimbursement acupuncture.
Acupuncture was previously a covered benefit under Medi-Cal, and then it was removed as a benefit, and they just posed the question, should we seek to provide it as an option under Medi-Cal for those who would benefit from it? To me, it was a no-brainer, as someone who cares about health policy, who cares about the diverse populations of our state, to make sure that they get the health care they want in the way that they want it, in the form that they want it, that it could be a benefit. Not everyone's going to choose it, but some, it's their preferred. So we proposed it. We went through the normal budget process for public input and comment and debate and dialogue and discussion, and I think people found it to be very compelling. I don't think it was it was very controversial. There was broad support for this idea that it could be an option that should be covered under Medi-Cal for those who desire and seek acupuncture and Chinese medicine services.
Having worked successfully on the state level to promote and pass AB 833, restoring acupuncture coverage by the California Low-Income Medical Insurance, Medi-Cal, the AACMA would later advocate for acupuncture to be covered by the federal insurance programs, such as the Affordable Care Act and Medicare.
We made great progress on the state level of California, but when I got elected to Congress, I knew that we had to do as much as we could to get acupuncture to be accepted in our federal programs. And the biggest ones we have are Medicare and our Veterans Benefit Program. When I got elected to Congress, we were right in the middle of putting the Affordable Care Act together. And one element of that was determining what would go into the essential benefits that each state would have to adopt in order to have an ACA program. We had to have a campaign to have acupuncture included as an essential benefit. In fact, we were able to mobilize the Korean and the Chinese American communities, both of which heavily access acupuncture. And altogether, they wrote 25,000 letters to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I tell you, they've never seen so many letters in their lives, but they could see that this was very important to many, many people. And ultimately, they decided in our favor in that they would allow the states to include acupuncture as an essential benefit for any insurance program that they offer under the ACA. And California, of course, is one of those states.
To Medicare is a big system. There are almost 40 million beneficiaries. After the years we work, finally, they cover acupuncture treatment for the low back pain. But unfortunately, they don't cover acupuncture. Why? Because acupuncture is not Medicare provider. So they cover acupuncture treatment provided by the MD and other Medicare providers. Now we'll fight for become the Medicare providers. Every year we go to state capitol, go to the government, go to the legislature. They have then we call it acupuncture day. You have the picture, introduced acupuncture history. We also free clinic for the legislator, for the government employee.
The purpose of Acupuncture Day is to provide the legislator with an opportunity to learning and experience acupuncture with their first hand. So through the campaign, we help them the relief pain and serve some health problem and answer them question about acupuncture and the Chinese traditional medicine.
One of the issues that I thought was very important generally in my role as a California State Legislator, specifically in my role as a member of the California State Assembly Health Committee, also a member of and the chair of the Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus, to raise awareness, support different options and make sure that folks are getting the type of care that they want and that they need in the way that they desire. And part of that was educating and making people aware of acupuncture. So this was an idea that was shared with me by Dr. Sam and Dr. Weiwei to have an acupuncture day in the California State Capitol. They brought different acupuncture providers and allowed people to experience it. You know, when I would participate and visit, it was packed and it was full of energy and full of activity, and there were staff and legislators, receiving different types of acupuncture services, asking questions, learning. The outcome was exactly what we hoped for. You know, greater understanding, greater learning, greater appreciation of acupuncture as a type of service and healthcare, among many others that people could elect as they saw appropriate for them. And I think when people experienced it, touched it, felt it, heard more about it, learned more about it, there was an appreciation for it.
Over the last 7 years, the AACMA continues to develop and inspire its peers across the country with accomplishments such as Acupuncture Day, being held for 5 consecutive years at the State Capitol building to promote traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture to legislators, government officials, and employees. In March 2015, the association successfully stopped a bill allowing unlicensed personnel to administer acupuncture for detoxification purposes. The AACMA continues to hold the San Francisco International Symposium on Traditional Chinese Medicine annually. The event is now in its 10th year, and most recently, the AACMA actively responded to the COVID-19 epidemic by writing to the Vice President, members of Congress, and government officials at all levels to recommend the inclusion of traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture in the prevention and treatment of COVID-19 across the entire country. The AACMA published COVID-19 related practice guidelines for members and other licensed acupuncturists and donated funds, PPE, and Chinese herbal products to the frontline medical personnel battling the virus in the United States and China. It has been well over a century since acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine was first introduced to the United States. And with the help of acupuncture, early community practitioner and political advocates, along with associations such as the American Association of Chinese Medicine and Acupuncture, this 2,500-year-old practice has finally found its way into modern-day America.
When acupuncture was considered a legal practice, something legal, and people could set up their sign, acupuncturist, it became, I just remember it just become accepted. And then more and more it became an established institution.
From the legalization in the 70s, almost half a century by now, I can see the whole course, development of our profession is quite steady. As a matter of fact, that I can see that this ancient Chinese medical treatment is gradually incorporated into American healthcare system. That's quite fascinating.
People say, why has it taken so long? It really hasn't taken that long. We went from never having heard the word acupuncture, finally Reston goes to China, and then barely 20 years later, we're licensed in almost every state. It's a miracle, really, when you look at it. Some that's sticking in needles all over the place. Western medicine is going to allow this, and the medical boards and the state legislatures, and they're going to, well, it's now licensed in nearly every state. It's really been a miracle what we accomplished when you look at it from that point of view.
I was get my license in 1988. My number is 3,000. Now the number is 20,000. I think the percentage almost same like China. Almost same like China. So now, more and more people trust and like acupuncture.
I still use acupuncture for pain situations, for back, or in this case, I just had my second knee replaced. So before that, I was taking a lot of acupuncture to deal with the pain. Now I don't have it as much, but I believe in who they are, and I believe more importantly of their integrity and their ability to be honest with people and say that, you can't solve everything. You can't cure everything, but for chronic pain, it is measurable. I mean, imagine having a baby with acupuncture, or a surgery, minimal surgeries with acupuncture. It works.
I think that really people are looking to alternative medicines as an option to pharmaceuticals and to the side effects of many drugs that Chinese medicine just simply doesn't have. There's, very few things we can't treat with Chinese medicine, herbs and acupuncture, moxa. Anyway, I think the future of Chinese medicine is great.
Acupuncture now is available, almost acupuncturists in every city, in every corner of Manhattan. In terms of what is the future of acupuncture in America, I agree with Steinberger's judgment. Acupuncture is a good thing for America.
These people, with their philosophy and their tradition and their skill, have made a real impact on California and made a real impact on America. Almost inconceivable if you were trying to think 50 years, where would we be today? This is just a fact that acupuncture has a respected position where it was esoteric and certainly marginal 50 years ago.
It's been a triumph. It's great history, something we're proud of.
We want to preserve the memories, keep the record of future research, let people know how acupuncture evolved in California, because it's very important to let people know the history, because without history we have no future.